NDIS.
A little earlier, I caught up with the Shadow NDIS Minister, Michael Sukkar, and I started off by asking him about that case.
In that instance, it was pretty clear from the Sky News report that those funds were being used improperly. There are other instances where, following a federal court decision, services, whether they be prostitution, presumably visits to brothels, have been in some instances deemed as reasonable and necessary as outlined under the legislation. And my message is very clear. Australians support the NDIS. Australians are very happy to go to work each and every day and see their taxpayers' dollars go to worthy things like the NDIS. But when we signed up to this scheme, we did not sign up for prostitution and money being spent in brothels under the NDIS. So our position and my position is very clear. It is improper. It should not be something that is allowed, because ultimately every dollar that's spent on a prostitute is one less dollar that can be spent on worthy recipients under the scheme. And we know the cost pressures that are facing the NDIS, even though Bill Shorten, the minister, he says there's no sustainability. Well, he said before the election there were no sustainability issues with the NDIS. Now that they're in government, he says something quite different. So my position is very, very clear on this, Chris. Money under the NDIS should not be being spent on prostitution and brothels, full stop.
Yeah, look, I think most Australians would agree with you. You need to change the law or whatever needs to be done to make sure there can be no official prostitution funded by the NDIS. But the example where another carer is presumably paid for under some other category and provides prostitution services, obviously that's a rort. But if Jonathan Lee and Sky News were able to uncover that, it's an insight, isn't it, into how easy it must be to rort the system overall, to pay people for one service but get something completely different.
And look, that's why the former coalition government set up a fraud task force. I think that work needs to be done at an even greater pace. I mean, the reality is big schemes like this rely on compliance activity. It relies on making sure people are spending the money allocated on their plans on things that are allowed and that are stipulated in their plans. And the only way you can track down that fraud, Chris, is if you have rigorous compliance and if you have penalties for people ultimately who deliberately and fraudulently break the rules. So the minister now has been in the seat for 6 months, Bill Shorten. He's done nothing about this. He's said a lot. He's diagnosed a lot of problems, but no solutions. And at the end of the day, for a scheme like the NDIS, its long-term viability and sustainability is going to be partly rely on ensuring that the money is being spent on what Australians would reasonably expect the NDIS to fund. And again, prostitutes, spending it in brothels, that is not what I think the vast majority of Australians thought that they were signing up to when the NDIS was established, and the minister should stop it today.
Now, the problems that we're seeing unfold were not unexpected. As soon as you set up a big national scheme like this, everybody knew it would be open to rorts. You've got to police that very, very carefully. The other problem, though, that was always going to occur was how you allow people to qualify, and especially given it's the federal government's program now, the states might be trying to shift more people onto the federal program, the NDIS. Now, Bill Shorten has been saying that's a problem now. How can you be tough enough to sort of stop so many people coming onto the scheme, especially if it's the state governments that are trying to push them onto the NDIS?
Well, look, there are two parts to this, Chris. At the end of the day, the NDIS is increasing in cost because it's helping more people. And in the end, the coalition in our time in government saw the NDIS rise from 30,000 participants to more than 500,000, and those participants are worthy of that assistance, and we're the ones who saw that growth quite happily, because people who genuinely need that assistance should have it available to them. The issues that you've described with the NDIS go back to its formation when Bill Shorten in the Gillard government was negotiating along with Julia Gillard, with the states. And the states had them over a barrel. They were a chaotic government, as Labor governments tend to be. And the states hoodwinked them into an agreement which basically means that the federal government sees virtually all of the upside growth in the scheme. That has seen a significant cost shift from the states to the federal government. It's good that Bill Shorten has finally recognised that he was completely outplayed by those states when they initially negotiated that agreement, but he's not said what he's going to do about it. I mean, running around giving interviews saying the states should step up, the states need to do more, the states are abrogating responsibility, which are all things that Bill Shorten has effectively said, is not enough. What is the plan to solve it? What is the plan to improve it?
It is a big challenge for government. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael.
Good on you, Chris. Thanks so much.